Hey everyone, my name is Yarrow and you're listening to the Dating Rose podcast. I'm super happy and grateful you're here, and I'm bringing you another episode with someone else. I know I kind of published a couple of solo episodes recently, which you guys seem to love, but I also want to bring awesome people back in, and so I'm going to try to alternate. That might not always work, but I'm on a schedule to release a new episode every Friday now, and in the long term I hope that every other one will be an interview, and then every other one will be just me talking about something that you guys have asked or are interested in some ways. So yeah, this is a really beautiful episode. I talked to my friend Elinor, who has really amazing ideas about listening to the land, working with your ancestry around colonialism and violence, storytelling, and what it means to build a business in these days in ways that feel aligned with our ethics and political ideas. So yeah, especially the rest of the conversations around business, well actually all of it, but I will say I need to do some more thinking about the stuff that we talked about towards the end around business, and I'm excited that Elinor is doing this work and I want to get involved, and yeah, I'm just excited. I think that's what I'm saying. Sorry. It's a beautiful episode and I hope you'll like it too, and I would love to hear what you think. I think both of us would love to know. So find us on Instagram, let us know, and add your thoughts. I have a couple of announcements before we go on today's show. The first one is that on November 18th, I'm running a free online workshop on tarot for beginners. It's going to be a slightly longer 90-minute one in which we can meet and brainstorm ideas for how you can read for yourself, or maybe even others when you're just starting out and you want to get a sense of, what can it mean for you to read intuitively when you don't know all the cards yet. But yet you want to find a way to do meaningful storytelling and with self-reflection and exploration of ideas and concepts and possibilities in your life. We'll also look at working with the elements and integrating small rituals into your everyday life. That's probably one of the most important things to me right now, is finding small ways of making everyday life more magical, especially at a time when we have very little energy or are drained in some way and just still want to keep that connection to the magic going. So yeah, join us for that. That's free. If you can't make it on the day, there'll be a replay, so sign up anyway and I'll send that to you, and I would love to meet as many of you as possible on the workshop. The second announcement is that I have 3 episodes for the DIY Magic podcast out now. So go check that out and let me know what questions you have and what you want me to cover. This podcast is very much for you. If you are interested in small business stuff, I just want to share as many resources and ideas as possible, and I loved and really appreciated the feedback I received so far. Speaking of which, if you like either of my podcasts, either this one or the other one, please leave a review on iTunes. That really makes a massive difference to how many people can find this, and I just don't want to spend money on ads. That means I need to charge higher prices for what I'm offering, and then everyone loses, and that's boring. So let's not pay out money, and let's get this known in other ways through community. That would be really helpful. Thank you. And then the final announcement is that I want to tell you what I just released for the Magic of Embodiment program for the second module that came out on the Scorpio new moon yesterday. So a quick recap: the Magic of Embodiment is a year-long low-cost program where we're looking at tarot, folk herbalism and ritual through the lens of embodiment, and really reclaiming our bodies and finding and making a home in them. And so each month I'm sending you ritual suggestions, tarot spreads, really simple herbal recipes, plant profiles, audio recorded workshops with small movement and journaling practices. So I'm trying to keep everything as accessible as possible. They're kind of bite-sized but also really rich. So each month there's really like a variety of different things that you can try, and none of them take a lot of time or require you to buy expensive stuff. And you can become a part of the program by pledging $3 or more on my Patreon. And this is a self-study program, meaning that you can do it in your own time, but you can also show up for the live workshops that I'm running frequently to kind of have this sense of community and a little bit of gentle accountability and to ask questions. And so the second module is called Protection, and it's just come out, and here's what's included. There's an audio intro on protection and embodiment, a herbal recipe for luxurious bath melts, a plant friend profile for hawthorn, a tarot spread for protection, an audio with a self-massage practice, an audio on working with the archetypes of the sword suits in the tarot, a ritual suggestion for boundaries and protection, and then a space to share and ask questions. So it's not too late to join. In fact, it never is. This is open access. But yeah, if you're interested in this subject, then it might be now is a good time to join us. I'll link to that in the show notes as well. And if you have any questions at all, let me know. Thank you so much for listening. And now enjoy today's interview. Hello, everyone. I am super excited to speak to a really wonderful person today. I have Elinor here with me. We have met quite some time ago, maybe 2 years even. I mean, time is a funny concept to me these days. I'm not totally sure. But we've known each other on the internet for a while, and we met on a Facebook group, which, to be totally honest, is not usually a place where I meet people that I'm really into. So this was like a happy surprise. So we got to know each other a little bit better, and then we worked together, which was also a really great experience. And I just love Elinor's whole vibe. I love the website and what the work is about. So I'm really excited to get to ask some questions today. And I will stop my little fangirl intro now and just hand it over.
I'm blushing over here.
No.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I don't ever know quite what to say about myself. I mean, I have my sentence about what I do, but I think that will become apparent as we talk anyway. So, hi, I'm Elinor, and I'm really happy to be here chatting with Yarrow.
Great. Thank you.
Which you all already know.
I also want to say, because people don't know this, that you have so many herbs behind you. I wish everyone could see, but it's a really beautiful setup. I would love to go through that cupboard and smell them all and touch them and taste them. Sounds amazing. Cool. So I always love to kind of start the conversation in a way that feels grounding to me by asking where you are in the world and what nature is like for you right now.
I am in very rural southern Scotland, and what nature is like for me right now is really wet.
Yeah, me too.
Very, very wet and quite windy as well. But also really beautiful. It's like I'm looking out my window to the side, and there's several really mature blackthorn trees there, and they've all lost their leaves already, but they've still got some sloes on. And down closer into the nearest village to me, there's a lot of cherry trees their leaves are turning bright. I think turning bright red this year. Like sometimes they just go yellow, but this year everything's really bright, all the autumn colours. So yeah, it's really beautiful, and I really don't want to go outside today.
Yeah. I love that. It's been really beautiful to imagine kind of what things look like outside your window. And also, it's a bit scary because every single person I've interviewed in the UK this autumn, which, well, weren't that many, but I also just been speaking to a couple of friends up north, and everyone says, wow, like something really significant has been different this year, like deeper or brighter, or people who never had elderberries up on the mountain this year had them because the summer has been so hot. And yeah, there's some beauty on it, and then there's also some like wow, it's really happening, things are really changing now.
Yeah, definitely, that's definitely the case here. I mean, we don't normally get back in the spring, we don't normally get our Mayflowers on the hawthorn until June, but we had them in May this year. So it's like a full month earlier, and then we had like 32, 32, 33 degrees centigrade temperatures, which is like in Scotland. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
But yeah, it is kind of, yeah, and the winter was really harsh as well, so it's been a year of real extremes weather-wise, and it's like, okay, if this is how it's going to be, you know, what are we doing? How can we meet this?
Yeah. Ooh, that's really deep shit. Yeah. And speaking about deep shit, which is a really beautiful bridge, I really love how you are talking and writing about spiritual aspects of activism, and the need for activism and spirituality. So I would love to kind of start our conversation there to see if you can say a few more things about why these things are both important and related to you.
Mm. It's taken me a while to actually be able to articulate that, because I've, like, from when I was really, really little.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was lucky enough. My parents were hippies, and
Mm-hmm.
when I was born in 1970, so it was like they took me around all the standing stones and all the hill forts and and they also took me to loads of Save the Whale and CND demonstrations and all of that kind of stuff. And they were involved in a strike in like the late 70s. So I was carted along to the picket line, and so it's just always been there, like both that spirituality of connection to the earth and the cycles of the earth, and like our ancient ancestors
Mm-hmm.
and how they lived with the earth,
Mm-hmm.
and this needing to engage now
Mm-hmm.
with what's happening now and with social justice and environmental justice. But for me, it's like, for me, this is something that I realized when I was training as an interfaith minister in the late 90s, is that spirituality for me is actually, it is about me and my connection to source and all that is. But more than anything, it's about it's like that, the Grail question. Whom does the Grail serve? It's like, who do I serve? What do I serve? How do I serve? And I think there are phases in the spiritual path where service isn't so important. And I think, there are waves. There are waves on any path where you're more inward, and then times when you're more outward. But for me, that's the connection between activism and spirituality. It's like, one of my convictions is that we are all part of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't just mean humans, I mean literally all life on Earth, all life in the solar system, all life in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
We're all part of each other. So if I'm in service to life, which is kind of the fundamental of my spiritual outlook, then I need to be concerned about what's happening to all these other beings that I'm part of and who are part of me, which means taking a stand sometimes, which means looking at not just what is happening, but why is it happening, and how can we change that. So but it's, I mean, somebody said something to me the other day, one of my peers said something about that, I can't remember where the quote comes from, but if it's not practical, it's not spiritual. Which was just like, yes. So for me, that's like, I am where I am, and I've learned to be here and not to try to escape into spiritual realms, and not to kind of try to bypass things with and it's like, well, if I'm here and I'm facing what's happening, and I feel this deep connection to everything else, then I can't not, it's a spiritual imperative to actually try to do something.
Yeah, totally. And it feels good and grounding. I feel like the two together just ground each other, and that's really great. There's such different spheres of the human experience on some level, and yet they have this beautiful dance between each other. And it's not like one is the grounding thing and the other is the airy outdoor thing. They're just kind of, when they're together, then they feel really grounded.
Absolutely. I think that's really that's a really important point, because it's not like the movement is just from the spirituality to the activism. It's like the activism also informs it's kind of like a two-way relationship. It's not just always going in one direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know quite a bit about your work because we work together, which is great. But I would love everyone else to know a little bit more about how what you just shared with us manifests in what you're doing in the world, and maybe even a little bit more about what your vision is with that, or what you're most excited about right now. So I know that you have things in the pipeline that are kind of seeds right now, and I know, like, oh, it's so beautiful to feel these seeds already and to know next year is going to be great. So I would love to know. Yeah, just tell us
Yeah.
more.
Okay. So one of the things I'm is a storyteller, so I'm going to tell this as a story of development. So this may go on for a bit of a long time. So
That's okay. Yeah.
hopefully I keep people's interest. So back in May this year, I was supporting a friend with writing their PhD, and they were writing their PhD about ancestor reverence, transgenerational sexual trauma, and healing. And they also, you probably know that it's Pavani Murray who does the Bespoken Bones podcast,
which is great, by the way. People,
it's amazing. It's amazing. Go and look it up. It's fantastic. And they said that they wanted to interview me for the podcast because they knew I did storytelling and I was interested in ancestors. And we talked a little bit about how I am working slowly on telling the story of my grandfather, who was, well, I won't get into that now because it will just go on forever. But anyway.
Let's just say there's an interesting story.
Yes. And Pavani basically presented it to me that what I do is ancestral storytelling in various ways. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess it is. And P was like, you know, you could do a course about that. And I was like, oh, I guess I could. And then my ancestors were like, yes, yes, you're going to do that thing. Because I had completely different plans for this autumn. But my ancestors were like, that's what you're doing. Go and do the thing. And I was like, okay. And it's actually the program that I put together that I'm still leading at the moment, through to the 21st of November, is for white people to really engage with their inheritance of white supremacy and colonialism and racism by working with an ancestor. But first of all, by kind of rooting themselves in a personal practice and grounding themselves in a personal practice of ancestor reverence as a support for that work, which can be quite emotionally difficult. But also to connect with the story of a single ancestor and to look at how not how that individual ancestor was or wasn't personally racist, but about how their life was part of the movements and processes of white supremacy and colonialism and racism in their time, and use that to reflect on and engage with how their own lives are wrapped up in those processes today. And it's like, oh wow, so I can actually do all this stuff, all like the storytelling stuff and the spirituality stuff and the activism stuff, all in the same place. And it's like, oh, I wonder what else I could do. You know, so it's actually brought me a completely different perspective on what I'm doing. So now I'm playing with how I present what I do, but it's basically that I work with people who want to make spiritual practice part of their everyday life and work. Spiritually grounded social activism, like acts for social change. I think I'll start that bit again.
We have time.
My words have got. Anyway, yeah, it's working with people who want to make action for social change part of their everyday life and work, and who are having difficulties with that for any reason, particularly people who aren't at home or have had to leave mainstream religious and spiritual traditions, to support people to find that spiritual grounding and that spiritual nourishment and support for that resilience, to be able to make social activism a day-to-day thing. So there's the program I was just talking about, which is Rooted, and then I have a midwinter program that I've run before, which is connecting with it's actually an ancient Roman thing, the 12 people. Many people have heard of the 12 days of Christmas, particularly because of the song. but that actually comes out of an ancient Roman practice of using the 12 days of Saturnalia as divination for the 12 months of the year to come. And I've run it before just as that, but this year I'm thinking, oh, anybody's welcome to do it, but it's like I'm adding a review of the previous year onto it, so you can look at, okay, so what was happening in the natural world, what was happening economically, what was happening socially, what was happening politically, and what was happening in me, and how were all those linked in each month, to kind of have this is where I've been, and then do that deep dive into dreaming and divination and working with the planets through the 12 days. So there's a real break between the last year and the next year, and a space to vision from that deeper place. Okay, what feels like is going to be important in the next year, and what I want to focus on in the next year. And I've got so many programs just kind of bubbling up out of me with this, and I've got my Ancestral altar next to me, and I'm just touching the altar cloth and saying thank you for this focus that basically they've given me, because it feels so good. And what I want to do eventually is work towards having, rather than offering the programs kind of or in addition to offering the programs as this program starts on this date and finishes on this date, to actually have an online space, and regular like support calls where people can take almost any program at any time at their own pace, because I know how important it is to pace things, to not try and dash through things. All of this work is lifelong work, both the spiritual stuff and the social and the activism stuff. We don't need to be running, or some people do, and that's great, but I know for myself, I'm like, okay, I need to go slowly and just pace myself so that I can do the best I can do for the longest time possible, because I intend to be here for quite a long time.
Great.
On this planet, in this incarnation. But yeah, I'm kind of babbling a bit now because I'm excited.
Yeah, excited
but
too.
like that, my vision is to move towards like that kind of online space and ongoing support, so people can get support up wherever they are in a program. And like community support and action learning sets, like peer support in smaller, all kinds of things. But and all of that just came out of a conversation with one person, and my ancestors going, do that.
Yeah, that's magic, isn't it? That's beautiful. I am so excited about this project or this idea and the work on so many levels. And while you were talking, I was trying to make mental notes to kind of reflect back to you. And I think I made 6 in total, but I might remember 4. So let's just try. So first of all, I'm really excited to see that you are thinking about a more sustainable business model. I've been thinking about this a lot too, and I think that we in the online world, which is kind of like an unrelated side note to what you're just saying, but I think this model of pushing hard launches for short-term programs that people then have to go through in a certain period of time is really difficult for everyone involved, like not just us. And so I think this view of like building a community that where people can gather wherever they are in different programs is really great. And I really love running my monthly free webinars, and I look forward to next year maybe getting to a place where I can run them every other week and just meeting people where they're at and giving them time and resources and a container, I think is really good. So yay for that. And then the other thing I wanted to say is I am really glad to see that more white people are doing this work of holding space, because I think that is really work that we need to do, that we can't expect people of color to do. And I also think that guilt and shame might be like human you know, human emotions coming up as what's going on, as part of what's going on in the world right now, but they're not kind of actionable or useful emotions just by themselves, right?
No,
So I really think we need to work with those emotions and transform them into something that will create actual change. And I
yeah,
think part of that will be processing the stories of our ancestors and seeing the greater picture without falling into navel gazing. And that's how we come together and you know, hold each other accountable in really respectful and gentle ways, and seeing what work we can do with the resources and the privileges that we have. So that's really cool and exciting. And then another note I made was like, I love this idea of doing this in winter, because I think, you know, not everyone celebrates the new year on the 1st of January, and that's not a key part for me. And I know I didn't hear you say that anyway, but I do think that going inwards in winter and reflecting and seeing what happened in the last cycle and what might be coming up is next is really important, because time is passing so quickly. And I think that often results for us in feeling really ungrounded and like, fuck, where's September been? You know, I have not had enough ritual and observation of the moon and the cycles to feel like I was really present with that month. And it's my favorite month in the year, and it just passed so quickly. So in October, I'm a lot more like, yeah, slowing down, and I think this kind of work really facilitates that super beautifully. I had more thoughts. Let me try. Oh yeah, one last thing. I also think it's interesting that, you know, I know you will work with people internationally, which is beautiful, but you and I also happen to be in the UK, and I think living in the UK, sometimes it can be easy for people to think that we don't have to confront colonialism in the same way, which is so ridiculous
which
if you really think about it, right?
yeah,
But we're just, I think there's like a slightly different public consciousness around race in the UK,
yes,
for sure. And so it maybe manifests in small things, like we don't tend to say what colonized territory we're on at the beginning of interviews, which I see is more and more practice in Northern America. But I think we really have to dig into our own stories and see how on so many on an unimaginable amount of levels we have benefited from colonialism and the wealth that has been accumulated through slavery and colonialism and so much violence. So I think that is important and exciting too. And then finally, just have one more thought.
yeah.
Gosh. Oh yeah, this will be my last thought. I also think it is shocking every now and then to see when we're stepping out of these social spheres that we are on the internet. And I think, I don't know if you consider yourself to be an introvert, but I feel like we're both kind of like more more introverted people
Yes,
probably.
very.
I sometimes feel like I socially just have very limited social energy, and so a lot of my engagement and input happens when I'm in bed on the internet on my phone,
Yes,
for example.
yes,
And so I think on the internet it's a lot easier to be very selective with the social spaces that we're in, and it is then quite easy to feel like, oh, but everyone is already talking about race, so like surely we must be collectively heading in the right direction. But actually, when you step out of that, that's really not true. There's still so much ignorance and avoidance and really like an unwillingness to look at facts. And so I think we really need to strengthen our resilience to go out there and have these conversations and keep bringing them up. And that takes, yeah, resilience and strength.
yeah, and I think it takes knowing that we're supported. Um, and I think as an introvert, especially one who lives so very rurally, my nearest shop where I can buy, like my nearest supermarket is 15 miles away.
Wow.
um, it's actually, it's so that, and my main social contact is on the internet. So it is really easy to get into that, not just that echo chamber of, oh, everybody agrees with me.
Yeah.
But also to feel very alone, because that physical sensory engagement is missing. And I love living where I do. I have learned, you know, when I moved here in 2000, I often say that this place, this land, is where I learn magic. It's where I learned my witchcraft. It's where I learned everything. Because I was able to, in such an what's the best way of describing it? In such an open and free way, listen and pay attention and be present and build relationships with all of the beings in this landscape. And that's wonderful, and I miss it if I'm in a city, but at the same time I also miss the contact with other human beings living where I do. So it's that and I think feeling, for me, you know, feeling supported when I don't have lots of other human beings around me who are in the same physical space supporting me, having that access to that inner support of a personal practice, whether people consider that to be spiritual or not. I know not everybody's happy with talking about spirituality. It can be a really profound source of strength. I mean, I've been rewriting my homepage for my website, and it's like I was thinking about all the people who've been really important activists who have had that, you know, as problematic as all human beings are in various ways. It's like there's no doubting that people like Mahatma Gandhi, people like Martin Luther King Jr., and so many other activists, I mean, right up to the present day, Starhawk and Joanna Macy, and I've forgotten the all the liberation theology people in South America, none of whose names I know. But there's just so much strength and power to act comes from that inner resourcefulness, that inner strength of being, and I think it's being part of something bigger than yourself. So that's, and not just something human that's bigger than yourself, but something that is bigger than humanity, that's bigger than one lifetime, that's, you know, yeah. And I think that helps with things like the guilt and I so agree with you about guilt and shame. It's like guilt and shame, yes, we feel them, like fear, anger, guilt, shame. They're like, we don't like them. They're uncomfortable. We feel them. And in themselves, they're no use to us unless we use them as signposts. So, okay, I'm feeling guilty. And if we get self-indulgent in that and like go, oh, I feel so guilty, I'm such a, you know, all that kind of self-indulgence, or we do the which actually is a way of avoiding engaging with what we feel guilty about, like getting sucked into that just being in the emotion is a way of avoiding, oh, what's the guilt about, what's my responsibility, and what can I do? And so is turning away from guilt and shame because it feels uncomfortable. You know, so it's like it's only by actually engaging with the uncomfortable that we can go on to actually kind of seize our agency and say, you know, because alongside, like my kind of my touchstone at the moment is we are all part of each other. We are each other's sovereign. So both of those at the same time.
Yeah.
Both of those. And we can't claim our sovereignty and agency if we're not looking at, where does this feeling come from? What's my responsibility and what am I going to do? So that's kind of, yeah, sorry, that was a bit of a soapbox moment.
I had one of those just now myself, so that's all good. It's great. Yes to all of this. That makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. I would love to switch gears a little bit, since it's getting really dark. It's just looking into my garden and It's just 6:30, but it's so dark and it feels like it happens really quickly. Anyway, I would love to touch a little bit on seasonal living and what that means to you and how you're feeling as we're heading into winter, specifically I think in the UK, and I mean in many places. I think the winter has like a particularly gloomy outlook at the moment with Brexit that's coming in March, and so much uncertainty around that. How are you feeling about this winter, and how do you feel about seasonal living in general?
I both love seasonal living and find parts of it really hard. I really appreciate your focus on that, on the seasons and living with the seasons. And it's because my health has been so has not been so good for the last 4 years. I'm kind of coming a little bit out of a dip now, but it's like I don't have the energy to go into my little herb, even into my little herb garden that a friend set up for me, and the winds in January and February blew a big branch of a tree right on top of my herb garden. So it's like, one of the way, and I can't go for long walks anymore, so that's really restricted a lot of the ways that I would normally, connect myself with the seasons and the changes, would be to go on long walks and like really be with the landscape and all the different plant beings and the animal beings and the water and rocks. But what I'm finding is just kind of I'm actually falling back more on important dates in the calendar, because I haven't got that going out to engage with what's physically happening. It's like I'm returning to dates in the calendar, and I really am enjoying I played with the Wheel of the Year, the kind of the quotes mainstream pagan Wheel of the Year dates for a long time, and they never really kind of, other than Samhain, they never really kind of felt, they never really, I didn't feel them in my body, I think is the word. So I'm kind of, at the moment, I'm playing with the folk calendar, because a lot of the traditional dates of seasonal changes are slightly different from like the ones we're familiar with. Like in Scotland, the traditional Samhain is actually the 11th of November rather than 31st of October. And then if we go backwards to the autumn equinox, the traditional dates around that is the 29th of September, and there's this wonderful story about how you don't pick brambles, you don't pick wild blackberries after the 29th of December, because that's the date when St. Michael threw Lucifer out of heaven, and he landed in a bramble bush, and he got prickled by the bramble bush, and he was so annoyed about it, he was so pissed off at this, that he pissed literally on the bramble bush. which is the story of why you're not meant to pick brambles after the 29th of September. But if you look at the imagery of that and the symbolism of it, it the light, Lucifer, the light bearer, being cast down, which is that shift from the light half of the year to the days, the days, that's the autumn equinox is when the days start getting shorter. So it's like, for me, that's really the autumn equinox, is the 29th of September, because of that story. And I love, and like in the spring, the spring equinox, I connect a lot. A lot of it is really strongly connected to stories, like folk tales and traditional tales for me. Like at the spring equinox, there's the story of the Kailach. There's on the 25th of March is Lady Day, which is when the Kailach went to the Isle of Youth. That's the day on which she bathed herself in the waters of the waters of life on the Island of Youth, and became young again. So so I'm really finding I'm connecting to seasonal living and seasonal changes through like folk calendar, through traditional tales, which makes sense as a storyteller, and also through food. I do it a lot through food because that's something that I can access.
Oh yeah.
Even when I can't go for long walks.
Yeah.
But you know.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah, totally.
So I can see. Are those all vinegars? I'm just talking about seasonal living. Are those all vinegars that you've made?
Yeah, they are. So I have like a little apothecary behind me, and there's a couple of big bottles with vinegar, and they're mainly the orange ones are lemon balm, the dark one is elderberry, and then on the other side there's hawthorn together with rose, and then there's fire cider, and then here's a couple of oils that I'm infusing, and they're going to be in a free apothecary that I'm starting for my birthday in Brighton, which I'm really excited about. So this is the first year that I'm producing this quantity, and so yeah, that's really exciting. Speaking of free things, and this is again like a little bit of a switch in topic, but I'm too excited to not talk about it. Which is I read something really beautiful that you shared, and I can't remember where I saw it, but the words just really stuck with me, and it was that you are building a business beyond and against capitalism. And I thought like, ooh, that is such a good way of putting it, because I have a lot of feelings around, well, business and capitalism,
Yes.
as most of us do. And I
Yeah.
think it sometimes have like some shame, or maybe like resistance, or like there's a part of me that is like, can I even talk about business stuff with the work that I do? Because I have this podcast and that's one part of my business, but I'm also a web designer and I support people in the online marketing. And I feel that in the last few years, I have been able to align that work more with my values, and also to become clearer on what my values are. But at the same time, that's very much like a young journey, and there isn't much guidance on this out there. So I feel like I'm figuring a lot of stuff out as I'm going along, and I'm really diverging from the things that I have learned in the first 2 years in my business, which was, like, so interesting, because coming out of employment, I had to learn very quickly all these different business things, and it was like a really new thing, because that's not something that we learn at school usually, at least not in formal education. And then my basis was established, and I was like, okay, I guess this is kind of working. There's still a lot of anxiety around the practicalities of this, but I've got the basics figured out now. And then from that place there came this realization that actually a lot of these things don't feel good, and I don't think that they're going to be sustainable in the long term. And I am not sure, if I want to keep pushing that agenda. And then I changed things, and no one ran away, and it was fine. But that's just a side story. So I'm still doing this work, but in different ways. And I loved what you said. I think that just really felt really true to me, and I would just love to hear a few more words from you of what that means for you to have a business beyond and against capitalism.
Well, it's something that I realized. I did an undergraduate degree in social anthropology, and I studied Marx and different ideas about money and exchange around the world. And it was that was the point at which that seed of realizing that business and capitalism are not the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, capitalism can't exist without businesses, but businesses can exist without capitalism.
Yeah.
Because a business is, and hopefully this won't get too technical or academic or boring for people, but there's the basic distinction is that a business is about taking something that you make or that you offer and exchanging it with people for money or something else in order that you can meet your needs and the needs of your dependents and the needs of your community. Capitalism is taking money and resources, convincing people to buy things so that they can give you more money and resources just to have the money and resources. It's not about meeting needs, it's just about accumulating more and more capital. That's the basic difference between what a business is and what capitalism is. And I think we get we're so indoctrinated into the idea that business and
Mm-hmm.
capitalism are the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
and they really, really aren't. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're a creative person and you don't get on well with 9 to 5, or
Mm-hmm.
you don't get on well with authority, then being self-employed or freelancer running your own business is really attractive. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it has a lot of difficulties and challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of us who are creative like that have that kind of that
Mm-hmm.
ethical
Mm-hmm.
about doing things in a capitalist way, because it stinks. It's
Mm-hmm.
disgusting. You know, it's destroying the earth. It's why we have climate change. It's
Mm-hmm.
why we have slavery. It's why we have
Mm-hmm.
the after. You know, it's and I. There's a whole other rant I could go on about how capitalism and colonialism and white supremacy all built each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you go back to the 15th century, over the next few hundred years from there, you know, banking plus white supremacy made colonialism and slavery possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then colonialism built capitalism. You know, it was like the whole thing was completely intermeshed,
Mm-hmm.
and still is, and is becoming more so as transnational corporations have more and more power. And this is a rant that I will stop now, because it's kind of slightly off the point about business. But I mean, for me, I've been in workers' cooperatives, which is one approach to building businesses that are not capitalist in the way they work, but you can also do it as a sole trader.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of difficult to do it if you have employees, but I think that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
there are ways to make that
Mm-hmm.
work. But the fundamental thing is that if you're in business to make more and more profit and you don't really care about what you're doing, that's capitalist.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in business to birth something into the world that you're really passionate about,
Mm-hmm.
in order in order to meet your needs in a way that nourishes your soul, that's not capitalism. You
Mm-hmm.
know, that's and I just feel really excited about how many of us are building these small businesses from that
Mm-hmm.
standpoint, and the potential for that to create spaces of justice
Mm-hmm.
where we support one another,
Mm-hmm.
even within the overall unjust system of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's why I'm passionate about it, is because
Mm-hmm.
it's like, you know, there is the potential for a collapse to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Environmentally, it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Economically, it's likely. It
Mm-hmm.
may not be in my lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
but it's coming relatively soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope I don't sound too much like a conspiracy theorist or
No,
too
no.
way out here, but it's like, if we have these spaces of mutual aid and support,
Mm-hmm.
which aren't dependent on that capitalist system,
Mm-hmm.
where we can, if the money system collapses, where we can flip to a gift
Mm-hmm.
economy, because we've got those relationships of trust already built.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what's going to save us, if
Mm-hmm.
anything, can save something of humanity
Mm-hmm.
from what we've done collectively as a species,
Mm-hmm.
particularly European and colonial, you know, cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I just went on a really passionate rant
No,
there,
that was great. And no, honestly, that was really great. That made sense to me and really resonated. And in particular, the distinction between businesses and capitalism was a really useful way of breaking it down. That's great. I would love to make that into an infographic. Ooh. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I also agree with what you're saying. I also have mixed feelings about like being too pessimistic, but I personally, and I know everyone is different with that, but I personally at the moment really feel more comfort in confronting these really big fears around collapse rather than pretending that I don't feel them, because I do really, really feel them. And I take so much, yeah, comfort and joy in trading with people and exploring other ways of supporting each other. And it's beautiful to see that so many of us, or at least more and more of us, are open to trying something that we're not really good at, you know, or that is just new, like sliding scales. I think that's a big one
Mm.
for many of my clients at the moment. And it's a tricky one, it's complex, it's definitely
Yeah.
trying a new thing, it needs a lot of explaining. But it's also really exciting, and
Yeah.
yeah, so that's really great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think things like, and I mean, you know, it can feel really big and out, like
Mhm,
distant,
mhm,
but it is practical things like sliding scale,
mhm,
like um, not imagining, not restricting yourself to a model of employees and being a CEO if your business
mhm,
grows.
mhm,
It's like just looking at creative ways to build mutual aid as we
mhm,
grow our businesses,
mhm,
and to kind of, it's almost a process of decolon. I don't I don't want to dismiss the um, the brutality faced by peoples who have decolonized their nations,
mhm,
and who are in the process of decolonizing themselves from white European
mhm,
oppression.
mhm,
Um, but it is, I do think, all of us, whatever our backgrounds, wherever we are in the world,
mhm,
need to decolonize ourselves.
mhm,
Um, because colonialism isn't just a set of actions, it's also a paradigm, it's a way of
mhm,
thinking,
mhm,
as is capitalism, as is white supremacy, that however anti-racist we are personally,
mhm,
however anti-capitalist we are personally,
mhm,
they infect our thinking and the way that we form relationships, the way that we engage with the world, the way we think about ourselves. You know,
mhm,
it's in there in everything.
mhm,
And I really think that one of the vital, one of the most vital things we can do at this time is to
mhm,
actually break down
mhm,
those paradigms within ourselves,
mhm,
you know, like cis heteropatriarchy,
mhm,
capitalism, colonialism, white supremacy,
mhm,
all of them support each other.
mhm,
And different people have like strengths and passions in different
mhm,
areas for breaking those down.
mhm,
Um, and I think one of the most fundamental, it's this: we have to break down the paradigm, but we're stuck in the paradigm while we're breaking down the paradigm, which is
mhm,
why you get things like, in the Metro newspaper today, there was a whole page advert. I don't know if you've come across
mhm,
that. This whole page
mhm,
advert taken out by basically a cis women's organisation that doesn't want trans people to have rights,
mhm,
particularly doesn't want
mhm.
trans women to have rights.
Oh God.
And that's the kind of zero sum competitive thinking
Mhm.
that comes from
Yeah.
directly from cis heteropatriarchy and colonialism
Mhm.
and white supremacy.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think we for me, it's about building that sense of mutual aid between, okay, we're all
Mm.
working on our own little bit
Mhm.
of unpicking this enormous, it's like this enormous tapestry, and we're all
Yeah.
unpicking a little bit, and we need to support each other in
Mhm.
doing our own little bits of unpicking,
Mhm.
not tell each other you're doing it wrong, or you should be working on
Yeah.
my bit over here,
Yeah. Yeah.
and trust each other a little bit. And I know, like, it's hard for trans people to trust cis people, it's hard for
Mhm.
black people and people of color
Mhm.
and indigenous people to trust white
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
um, it's hard for queer people to trust straight people,
Oh
and on
yeah.
and on.
Mhm.
But it's like, just yeah, having that little bit of, it's almost like that really old fashioned meaning of charity,
Mhm.
where it's like you give people just a little bit of leeway and trust,
Mhm.
not to let them inside your closest boundaries,
Mhm.
but just if you know that they have goodwill and they're
Mhm.
doing their best.
Mhm.
It's difficult because
Mhm.
people have a right to be angry.
Mhm. Oh yeah, for sure.
Where, people have a right to be angry when people who are in an oppressor group toward, like,
Mhm.
in a relation of oppressor group to oppress towards them,
Mhm.
fuck up.
Mhm.
And I think even anger works better if you're in a
Mhm.
relationship of trust.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Mm.
sure. Um. Yeah, and there's a whole other conversation to be had about how that trust can be nurtured and earned and stuff. And
Mhm.
yeah, I just want to circle back to the ad for a moment, because I feel like maybe just have a few more things to say on that will also illustrate everything that you just said before, which I also agree with. It's just really heartbreaking to hear that. I didn't know about this ad, and I just cannot imagine what kind of headspace someone would be in as a group of women to spend so much money on something so hateful, when really at the end of the day it is something that is so personal, that is not doing any harm to these women at all, whether that's about bathroom space or identity, or what kind of passports people get, or if they get the health support that they need. That is just heartbreaking. And and I also totally agree with that being a part of a bigger picture of scarcity and pitting people against each other, not being able, or not growing up in an educational system that gives us the space to develop critical thinking skills and compassion, when there's so much competition. And yeah, that is really sad. And circling back, sorry, now I don't want to be rambling either, but moving on from that.
Clearly it's a rambling
Yes,
episode.
yes, it is. Yeah, so having held space for that sadness for a moment, that is really sad. And also I wanted to tell like illustrating a way for how it played out, what you just described in my life played out, and how I think that earth-centered spirituality is really bringing so much grounding in. So when I was employed in my 20s, I was working full-time often, and also studying full-time, because that's how I funded my studies. And I was so disconnected from the seasons. I really had no idea what was going on outside, like outside my office. I was working in London mainly, and there's just like I can physically feel this sensation of mainly artificial lighting and the blue itchy carpet, like the air conditioning in the summer, and so it was just gross. And then I never had any time, and I was just so tired and exhausted all the time. And if I think so I think for me in my late 20s, the biggest work was not gaining more knowledge or information. It was like really unlearning those mechanisms and the physical experience and embodiment of this idea that growth is everything at any cost at all times. And I think that's kind of where in small businesses the seasonal living also comes back in, that because we really pay attention to nature and have this connection, we're so lucky to have a different understanding of the necessity of contraction, for example, and how that's totally part of life as well. And I also feel like what feels grounding amongst us sometimes, not always, but sometimes, is this awareness that the resources of the earth that are not limitless. And so I feel many businesses in our little world are not set up to become corporations. Like that would never cross anyone's minds, because there's like a clear there's a clear limit to the abundance that I want to create for myself, and that feels really good. And it's when I first started in business, many people around me were like, no, I want to start a legacy business, I want to hit 6 figures in the first couple of months, and then I want to have $1 million business.
I'm sorry, I'm like 6 figures in 2 months. It's like,
yeah, right.
what?
We have to ask, like, what for? So there might be good reasons that I don't know about yet. If you have a big co-op and you want to support a village, maybe you need 6 figures, or you want to start a school, or like a real life school. I don't know, but it feels nice to be connected to nature and have just the naked feet on the earth sometimes, and be like, what I want for my life is like a stable forever home, and the ability to buy local organic food, and to be able to trade fairly with other people, and to trust that my basic needs will always be met, and I can be a supportive presence to other people in my community that are maybe less lucky than me. And that's just the limit. And it feels comforting to know, like, there's nothing I need to ask of myself and my energy beyond that.
It's like you don't have to be impressive, you don't have to be big, you don't have to, because so much of that is like either trying to show off to meet a self-esteem need that hasn't been met, or to kind of try to reach an identity that feels that we've been indoctrinated that we have to have. Yeah, I just love that what you said about the ability to contract, because that was the other bit about seasonal living that I didn't get onto, is that I have seasonal affective disorder, and I live in Scotland.
Oh God.
It's not a great choice there in some ways, but so for me, you know, I struggle every winter, and that's like one reason why I can never have a permanent full-time job. I mean, I can't have a full-time job full stop. You know, I don't think I could even have a part-time job. But like, there's no way I could have a permanent job that required the same of me from October to March that it did in the spring. And it's like that, my body's like, no, that makes no sense. And the world around me is like, no, that makes no sense. You know, the natural world is like, no, we, you know, things hibernate, leaves fall off trees, it gets dark. So it's only natural to like go inward and cuddle under a blankie and knit and crochet and drink hot chocolate and just sleep.
Yeah.
You know, frankly, just sleep.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And I do use a light box because I know without that, my winters are miserable. But it's not to try to make myself be productive.
Yeah.
It's simply to support my health and my emotional and physical needs.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. That's really so key with everything that we're doing for ourselves, I think, is to pause a moment and ask, am I doing this just to be more productive, or am I actually doing this for myself? Yeah. I think that's a beautiful note to end on, though. I think there would be so much more to say, and I hope you'll be back on the podcast sometime.
I would love to.
But before we go, can you let us know what you're currently offering or offering in the near future, and where people can find you?
Yes. Okay, so as I said, I'm offering Midwinter Magic, which is a program that runs from the 9th of December to the 9th of January. I do offer it as a DIY program if you want to do it yourself, or if you're in the Southern Hemisphere and Midwinter for you is in June. But the guided program in a group with kind of community and live calls for, there's a couple of live calls involved. It's from the 9th of December to the 9th of January. And thanks to inspiration from Yarrow, I'm starting some free seasonal calls. I'm going to be starting those on the 10th of November to kind of match up with those folk traditional dates that we were talking about. And those hopefully will include a bit of storytelling, a bit of an update of what's up with me, and then just space for whatever's coming up with people, in relation to activism, in relation to their personal, you know, in relation to what's happening in the world. So the first one of those I'm planning for the 10th of November, probably at 6 p.m. GMT. And then if people want to find me, they can go to elinorpredota.com. That's ELINORPREDOTA.com. And you can sign up for my newsletter there. There's access to free resources. There's a link through to my Patreon where I do most of my writing. And there's also, if you've enjoyed this conversation with me and Yarrow, I bet I've got all of the interviews that I've had with, like, conversations that I've had with people that have been recorded. They're on a page there as well that people can check out and get to know whether, you know, I feel like someone they want to connect with. And it just occurred to me, I've been putting this on hold for so long. I'm gonna make it happen by saying it in your Daydreaming Wolves right now. If anybody's interested in the idea of business beyond and against capitalism, I really want to have as many conversations with people as I can. So I'm not going to start that until March because I know I have a lot of stuff to do, and you know, I'm not going to start that till March. But I will give Yarrow a link to that, and if you sign up for my newsletter, I will that link will be going out so people can book just a short conversation with me, just to kind of find out what people
Mm-hmm.
are, where people are at, what's going on in the world that I
Mm-hmm.
don't know about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah,
Yeah, that's
I've
super.
said it now, I've got to do it.
Yes, yes, great. Okay, I will remind you in March. It's awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to have one of those conversations, and I hope that maybe then we can have another one on the podcast as well. And as a side note, I'm also launching a new podcast very soon, which is called Do It Yourself Business Magic. And I will talk specifically about this kind of stuff as well. So maybe we should have another chat for that one. But anyway, for now, I will add all those links in the show notes. If even people, if they didn't catch that just now, that's totally fine. It'll be there as well. Just to say thank you so, so much. This was amazing and rich and beautiful. And it's really nice to see your face again. And I'm really excited to share this. So thank you so much.
Yay! And thank you so much for inviting me on Daydreaming Wolves. I love the podcast and all the things you do so much, and it's just great to be able to hang out and chat
Thanks.
about all the things.
Yes, all the things. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.